say to you that I'm not even going to start off this show with me telling you what time it is, but rather I am going to turn it over to Annette as she reads some reports to you. Now, don't get bored. Don't glaze your eyes over. She's going to work hard to make it very engaging. But the fact is, our lives depend on you knowing this information, as does your life. So now, without further ado, Annette, would you please read up?
Okay. This report is from the source. I'm going to read to you the website. Is http://verdict.justia.com 2011-12-21, the National Defense Authorization Act explained, and http://verdict.justia.com 2012-1-2, the NDAA explained. One source of NDAA law information excerpts. When future historians inquire into how the practice of indefinite military detention without trial became formally entrenched in a country with such strong constitutional safeguards and stringent criminal justice guarantees, they will find that it did not happen all at once, but rather via a series of incremental steps. President Obama is now responsible for 3 of them. The first was to justify indefinite detention in litigation opposing the release of detainees held at Guantanamo. The second was to issue an executive order on indefinite detention, and the third was to sign the NDAA. Over the past 3 years, the Obama administration has aggressively litigated its power to continue to hold detainees indefinitely at Guantanamo, even in cases of detainees like Mohamedou Ould Slahi, people who are terrorists, if the administration's allegations are correct, but have no connection to traditional armed conflict. Still, even given the administration's court filings, its decision in March 2011 to issue an executive order on indefinite detention was disappointing. Although the March 7th order only applied to prisoners already in detention at Guantanamo, not future suspects, and expressly disavowed any intention of creating new legal authority for detention, it still formally established indefinite detention without trial as a long-term Obama administration policy. It made prospects for detention reform seem ever more remote. The motivations behind the March 7th order may have been praiseworthy. Facing pressure from congressional Republicans like John McCain to rely more extensively on indefinite military detention, the administration no doubt hoped in March that it could preempt legislative action by taking the initiative. That strategy obviously failed. More information. First, the NDAA at minimum reinforces and strengthens governmental authority to hold indefinitely terrorist suspects arrested outside of the United States, including American citizens arrested outside of the United States. By giving the practice an explicit statutory grounding and one that is broadly worded, the NDAA makes the practice of indefinite military detention less vulnerable to legal challenge. With 2 branches of government now firmly behind the practice of indefinite detention, the Supreme Court will be hesitant to strike down as unconstitutional even the most aggressive assertions of the detention power. Second, the law puts great pressure on the president to rely more extensively on indefinite military detention and military commission trials. While it does not actually make military detention mandatory for any category of suspect, given the existence of waivers and other loopholes, it provides Congress with ample grounds for post hoc criticism of the president's every detention decision. In a politically charged situation like the I can't pronounce it, I'm sorry. The case of the so-called underwear bomber, the NDAA could make it much more difficult for the president to keep the suspect in the civilian justice system. particularly if a terrorist attack were successful or close to successful. Members of Congress would line up to appear on Fox News to assert that the NDAA's provisions have been improperly applied. Okay, I'll read further later on in the episode. I'm going to return you back to Albert Torcaso.
We're kind of already back, but that's all right. All right. I know that you may have had your eyes glaze over, and also I know that she speaks of terrorism, and she speaks about this law, and it addresses real terrorists and suspected terrorists, and most of them have been foreigners. So, in fact, one might say, well, that's a good law. But it's not on many levels. But I want to double check something here and make sure I'm not screwing up. So give me 1/2 second. All right, good. All right, I'm good. All right, let me give you the rundown. First off, I'm going to say more about this later. But what goes on in these papers, if she were to continuously go further, there's like 7 pages, so we're not going to get to all that because I would fall asleep and so would she. No, I'm kidding, but seriously, what is going on is the NDAA stands for the National Defensive Authorization Act. And while it may sound like a law that is ultimately going to protect us and put in prison indefinitely terrorists, there are now provisions that could arrest any of the more than 300 million Americans, arrest and hold you, yes, you watching, indefinitely. Now you might say, well, I don't have anything to worry about. I'm a freedom-loving, God-loving American. But see, that's the problem. That's the problem. Congress wants you to believe, and the President of the United States wants you to believe you have nothing to worry about. But you have a lot to worry about. First of all, on so many levels, it's wrong. I may or may not get into it. But with the fact that we have the Patriot Act, we have the Military Commissions Act, we now have NDAA, and a few other laws over the last 10 years. With that combined, what you need to understand, this provision allows for the indefinite, no trial, no hearing, no attorney, no way out of indefinite prison, and it allows American citizens, yes, you, to be arrested if you are accused of terrorism. Now you might say, well, I never did anything. Can't be accused of terrorism. And you know what? Normally I would have agreed with you. But see, the problem is, if you are accused of any crime, it might be, who knows, maybe you had 3 grams of marijuana. And they decide to, the local law enforcement decides to turn it over to the military or the National Guard, which this law now permits. They can then say that you are a terrorist and that you're using that marijuana or that some of your money for that marijuana went to a terrorist. Okay, I know these sound extreme, but what I'm getting at is to illustrate a point. And that is that under the Patriot Act, Military Commissions Act, and now this act, you can be accused of a crime and be called a terrorist. And if you are accused, not proven guilty, not convicted. That's the key. Not proven guilty, not convicted. If you're just accused of a crime and they enact the Patriot Act or they enact NDAA along with the Military Commissions Act, they can take you away, lock you up forever. And it's even worse. They can take you away, decide to not lock you up forever. But even if you were born in America,